Wins and losses, knockouts and submissions. These headline grabbers are essential to MMA, but they only make up one part of the bigger, brutal picture. The pieces that are arguably more important, the countless bloody knuckles, cuts, gashes, and bruises it took to reach that point, often get lost in all the pre- and post-fight commotion. Luckily, these unforgiving journeys full of sweat, sacrifice, and punishment are the stories EA Sports UFC 6 aims to deliver, and man does it do that well. With an impressive roster of legendary fighters and a handful of curated stories that captured my complete attention the minute I dove into them, I found myself enjoying and appreciating the violent art of MMA more the longer I played, even if EA Vancouver's latest creation has strayed further than ever from the sport's reality. Yes, I'm talking about Flow State, the newest and most significant feature added since the series moved to the Frostbite engine in UFC 5. For the uninitiated, Flow State is a boost that, once activated, practically turns you into Bradley Cooper in Limitless. In UFC 6 though, it's harder to trigger since you can't simply choke down a sketchy tablet mid-match. Instead, filling your fighter's meter depends on the perks they have equipped and the boost conditions each one has. For example, a grappler like Islam Makhachev will enter flow state much faster by chaining together offensive submission moves than by unleashing a flurry of well-timed hooks and roundhouse kicks. Look, I get that flow is a very real thing because I've repeatedly watched Anderson Silva dodging a hailstorm of punches like he's Neo from The Matrix. But his instinct was born out of endless reps in the gym, and probably a bunch of behind-the-scenes knockouts too. The flow in UFC 6 is the opposite. It's manufactured and gimmicky, out of place like a Street Fighter move dropped in the middle of the octagon's bloody canvas. After getting so used to the straight-up, no-frills fighting that all the previous games in the series were known for, it's hard to take a feature like flow state into account. I'm not even kidding, I always forget to activate it when my meter's maxed out because it's the last thing on my mind. Still, even something as unrealistic as flow state can't knock down UFC's hard-hitting combat, which is otherwise as savage as ever. I'll be honest, the revamped controls and button combinations had me reeling at first, as if I was on the receiving end of a John Jones elbow. But once I got used to it, my vision cleared and the wild haymakers I was throwing turned into a coherent string of jabs, uppercuts, and leg buckling hits. Things got even better after that, because each punch and kick that I dealt felt like it landed with even greater force than in UFC 5. And more than these brutal moments, UFC 6 has greater physical realism, with the unexpected body contortions happening less during fights, which is great when that's an issue I saw all too often in the last game. Now, the flow system does have its moments though, especially in my favorite mode, Hall of Legends, which features 3 UFC greats in Max Holloway, Alex Pereira, and Zhang Weili.
Zhang Weili has regained the strawweight title! Wow.
It's where I've spent most of my time because everything in it, from the videos of each champion's humble beginnings to the thrilling reconstructions of their most iconic battles, is also easy to get lost in. And it was one of these bouts that helped Flow State shine, if only for a little bit. I'm talking about this, to be exact. Holloway's BMF title win. You would think that having seen some of these scenes live, rewatching their digital reruns years later wouldn't be as exciting. But they still are, at least for me. And I think they'll only keep that same electricity into the future, which is a big part of what makes UFC 6 special. These interactive memories are all so well told and unique in the way they unfolded that experiencing them over and over didn't feel like a chore at all. Still, you're probably wondering why this would be anyone's idea of a favorite mode when there are a few other exciting ones to choose from. Well, it's because I'm a sucker for a good story. And it doesn't get much better than the lore behind 3 legendary champions. But the dedicated UFC career single-player mode called The Legacy is pretty good too. Don't worry, I won't spoil much of the plot here because I want everyone to experience it knowing as little as possible. But I do love how it immediately got me invested in the journey with a rivalry, a career derailment, and the promise of revenge. Sure, it may sound like the overused plot of a Rocky movie, but that stuff works.
Watch my hand!
If going through a rags to riches story isn't your jam, you can always jump headfirst into the big leagues with the newly rebranded UFC Career Mode. Although I wasn't as invested without the standalone story to back it up, it's still plenty of fun. Not only due to the improvements I mentioned before, but also because Ken Shamrock and Randy Couture are finally included in the roster. At least now I don't have to create them both from scratch. Even though it is hilarious to hear a 62-year-old be called a young man by the commentators.
Yeah, John, this young man has thought about this moment for so long. He's worked so hard.
Overall, developer EA Vancouver's decision to create a separate prologue tale from the UFC Career Mode is ultimately what distinguishes UFC 6 most from its predecessor. Not only does it give you more options and a better onboarding experience, but it also doubles down on the overall pitch for this version, that every fighter has a story. A central concept I've seen consistently and resonated with the more I've played UFC 6. Now, even decent stories have their shortcomings with parts that drag and feel unnecessary in the grand scheme of things. And this tale of MMA, which so far has had more highs than lows, has one such blemish called the gym. When I first heard about it, I thought it would be like My Team in NBA 2K or Ultimate Team in Madden. Unfortunately, it's neither of those. Instead, it's where you can recruit a bunch of different fighters so you can train them to earn cosmetics. That's right, training in this mode is purely for the sake of looking good. Not in the lift weights to get buff way, but in the style of a vain influencer who does it just to get free stuff. Instead of Lululemon apparel though, UFC 6's The Gym grants fighter-specific rewards like coins, backgrounds, multicolored fight kits, and belts. Again, it's all just so unnecessary when the only point of training the fighters you collect in the gym is to earn accessories that you probably won't even notice once you're in the octagon. I know I don't, because I'm much too mesmerized by the bleeding cuts and blood spatters that practically turn the canvas into a brutalist Pollock painting. Sure, there's beauty in the hundreds of punishing hours that fighters put in to eventually reach peak form and conditioning, but not when it's minimized and turned to a sideshow for knickknacks like this. EA Vancouver believes that every fighter has a story, and with EA Sports UFC 6, it's completely proven its point.
You're winning by TKO, Chris Carter!
Despite a few unnecessary additions like Flow State and the Gym slightly hindering its overall success, the heart of UFC 6, 2 modes that pay supreme respect to the fighter's journey in Hall of Legends and the Legacy, more than redeem it. Taken in its entirety, this game is very much like a fable itself, a violent one that's split between fiction and reality, which typically isn't a good thing. But ultimately, the care and attention given to the sport's history, culture, icons, and everything in between helps it reach a satisfying end that any MMA fan should be proud of. For more on this year's sports games, check out our reviews of NBA The Run or MLB The Show 26. And for everything else, stick with IGN.